I remember the exact moment I stopped trusting Julia. It came out of nowhere, like a whiff of off-kilter perfume that leaves you turning to look back twice. Julia and I had been married 8 years. We lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, a quiet suburban sprawl of a city that had boomed over the last decade. Both of us were in our late 30s, and our marriage was, in all supposed respects, highly stable. I always considered our life together a good team, the kind of couple whose relationship was full of warmth and understanding. It was a weekday evening in the middle of October when the sun sets early. Julia sat with me at the kitchen counter, topping off the last of an old Sinatra tune humming softly from the speaker. "Makes the house feel so cozy in the fall, honey," she giggled as she rinsed our dinner plates. I dried them beside her, content in the domestic quiet. But then her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, and I caught a subtle smile flicker across her lips. She turned slightly away as she picked it up. "Work again?" I asked casually. Julia cleared her throat, barely meeting my eyes. Oh yeah." She paused, fingers tapping out a quick reply with practiced ease. "Just a client asking about tomorrow's presentation. Sorry." I shrugged, forcing a small smile. "No problem." She had always been diligent about work, but lately it was something more, an unusual frequency of late-night texts and after-dinner emails. I told myself not to pry. Trust was the bedrock of us, after all. So I swallowed the faint twist of doubt in my gut and turned to wipe down the counter. That should have been that. But once the seed of doubt is planted, it roots itself quietly in the mind. Over the next few days, I started noticing other little things. For instance, Julia had begun dressing just a touch nicer for work. Nothing drastic, just a bit more makeup on a Tuesday morning, or wearing the blouse she once told me she was saving for a special occasion on an ordinary office day. When I complimented her, she smiled brightly, gave me a peck on the cheek, and said, "Just felt like spicing things up at work, you know?" It sounded harmless, but something in my mind noted the change. Then there were the phone calls. She stepped out of the living room to take a few calls in the evenings that week. Each time she said it was her friend from college or her mother checking in. Normally, she'd put such calls on speaker or at least share a tidbit of the conversation afterward. Now she offered only quick, curt explanations. "Oh, that was Lila from the office. I'll catch up with her tomorrow anyway." When she came back to the couch after one such call, I remember how she slid under the blanket next to me a little too carefully, as if making sure not to brush against me. I inhaled and caught a faint scent that wasn't hers, a woody, musky cologne. It was subtle. Someone who wasn't looking for irregularities might not have caught it. But I did. Julia wore an airy jasmine perfume, nothing like this. I let it go that night, but a current of unease started to hum beneath my everyday thoughts. One evening, as we got into bed, I casually reached for her phone on the nightstand. "Mind if I plug this in? It's nearly dead," I lied. Usually she'd say thanks and hand it over. This time her hand darted out, and she snatched it before I could reach. "I got it," she said quickly, an edge of tension in her voice. She turned away, plugging the phone into her charger herself. I felt my chest tighten as I slid under the covers. The room was dark except for the soft glow of her phone screen reflecting off the ceiling. I could see Julia's face illuminated in that pale blue light. Her eyes flickered as she scrolled. Then she clicked the screen off and set the phone face down. Silence stretched out between us. I listened to her breathing, slow and steady, pretending to be asleep. My own heart was anything but steady. Maybe I'm reading into things, I thought. Work had been stressful for her lately, She'd mentioned a big client at Orion Corporation she was trying to land. Late-night calls and extra polish could all be part of that. And the cologne. She could have brushed against some client or coworker. No need to jump to ugly conclusions. But rationalizing only did so much. I found myself replaying each odd moment, analyzing them quietly. Over the next week, I stayed hyper-aware. And I noticed that whenever she thought I wasn't watching, Julia was on her phone more than usual, smiling at whatever she read. She had even changed her phone's lock screen password, something she hadn't done in years. It might have been nothing, or it might have been everything. The uncertainty gnawed at me. Still, I didn't want to confront her with nothing more than gut feelings and circumstantial clues. Julia was the woman I loved. She deserved my trust, I told myself, unless I had real evidence. I decided I would gather that evidence. On a damp Friday evening, I found my chance. Julia mentioned that morning she'd be late getting home, claiming she was going to a networking mixer with colleagues after work. She gave me a bright, apologetic smile and promised, "I won't be too late, Dan. It's just schmoozing with some Orion executives. Boring stuff. You wouldn't want to be there." I only nodded and sent her off with a kiss on the cheek, hiding the doubt twisting in my stomach. Now, standing in our driveway, as a light drizzle misted down, I noted the time on my watch. 7:30 p.m. Julia should have been at this mixer by now. I slid into my car and decided to see if her story held up. I headed downtown toward the address of the wine bar she'd casually mentioned. It was a place called Veritas, one we'd been to together once. As I navigated slick streets and rows of taillights, I rehearsed excuses in my head. If I found her there with coworkers, I'd just smile and say I came to surprise my wife, maybe join for a drink. Nothing weird. If she was actually mixing for work, she'd be pleased I was taking an interest. But if she wasn't there, well, I wasn't ready to finish that thought yet. 15 minutes later, I pulled up near the lounge. Warm yellow light spilled onto the wet sidewalk from the bar's big front windows. Inside, I could see silhouettes of patrons mingling, glasses in hand. My heart thudded as I scanned the crowd through the rain-spattered windshield. No sign of Julia among the groups of suits and dresses I could make out. I told myself she could be deeper inside or in a back room. Taking a breath, I grabbed an umbrella and stepped out into the drizzle, bracing myself for an awkward appearance. The hostess at the door smiled. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" "No, but I'm looking for someone who might be here for a corporate mixer," I said, trying to sound casual. "Orion Corporation event?" She frowned politely. "We don't have any private events tonight, I'm afraid. It's open seating. You're welcome to have a look around, though." My stomach sank. I walked through the lounge, glancing at each clustered conversation. I saw two men in an intense chat over their wine, a group of 4 women laughing at a corner table, a handful of couples at the bar. But no Julia. A cold trickle of fear crept along my spine. I stepped back outside, hardly noticing the rain anymore. She had lied about where she would be. I trudged back to my car, umbrella dangling uselessly at my side as the drizzle speckled my hair and shoulders. Sitting in the driver's seat with the engine off, I stared blankly at the steering wheel. My hands trembled slightly. Why would she lie? There could be an innocent explanation. Maybe the mixer got moved or canceled, and she was too busy to let me know. Or maybe she and a friend went somewhere else on a whim. I dialed her number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. She didn't pick up. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it was getting harder to avoid the obvious one. I needed to know the truth. Swallowing the lump in my throat, I decided to drive by her office on the off chance she was working late there instead. Orion's local headquarters were just a few blocks away. It was past 8 o'clock by the time I parked across the street from the sleek, dark building. Most of the windows were dark, save for a few scattered lights on the higher floors. I realized how foolish this might be. If she was cheating, she wouldn't take her affair partner to the office. Still, part of me hoped I'd see her car in the lot, safe and sound, proving she really was just working late. The rain picked up, blurring my view of the parking lot entrance. Every set of headlights that turned in made my heart leap. Finally, after about 20 restless minutes, I saw her. Julia's blue sedan rolled out from the garage. Relief and dread churned together in my stomach. She was alone in her car, as far as I could tell. She turned onto the street, heading back toward our neighborhood. I considered following, but instead I let out a shaky breath and pulled out a minute behind her, taking a different route home. If she caught me tailing her, any trust between us, real or perceived, would shatter completely. When I arrived home, Julia's car was already in the driveway. I took a moment to steady myself and wipe the rain from my face. Through the living room window, I saw her silhouette moving about inside. I walked in, trying to sound normal, maybe a little concerned. "Hey, you're back. How was the mixer?" Julia was in the kitchen, shrugging off her coat. It was nearly 8:30. She looked up at me with a bright, practiced smile, but I could see something off in her eyes. A flicker of worry, perhaps, or guilt. "It was fine," she said lightly. "Pretty dull, actually. You didn't have to wait up." I forced a chuckle and stepped over to give her a peck on the cheek. Her hair smelled of that same woody cologne. It was stronger now, mixed with a note of wine. My jaw tightened. "I wasn't going to sleep without seeing you," I said, managing to keep my tone gentle. "You must be tired. Wine and small talk can really wear you out." She laughed softly, a sound I normally loved, but that now grated with falseness. God, yes, so much small talk. "Let me just grab a glass of water, and I'll join you upstairs, okay?" I nodded and headed up to our bedroom, my heart heavy. In that moment, I wanted so badly to believe her. I wanted to lie down and accept her story as truth, to hold her like everything was normal and drift off, blissfully ignorant. But I couldn't ignore the evidence piling up in plain sight. The secretive texts, changed passwords, late nights, the lingering cologne, and now a blatant lie about her evening. As I changed into pajamas, I heard Julia in the kitchen, speaking quietly. I crept to the top of the stairs to listen, careful not to be seen. "Yes, I'm home," she whispered into her phone. A pause. "I know, I miss you too." I felt my insides twist, a nauseating mix of anger and heartbreak. She was talking to someone, likely him. Her voice was low but urgent. "I'll call you tomorrow, I promise. Tonight was too close." No, he didn't suspect a thing. I realized I was gripping the banister so hard my knuckles had gone white. My mouth had gone dry. She ended the call shortly after, and the kitchen went quiet. I dashed back to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to calm the storm of emotions roiling inside me. I needed to keep it together, or I might do something reckless. A few minutes later, Julia came upstairs, glass of water in hand. Her face was calm, a mask of the loving wife returning from a dull work event. She had no idea I'd overheard everything. "Everything okay?" she asked gently, noticing me sitting up. "Yeah," I lied, hoping the dim light would hide the turmoil in my eyes. "Just waiting for you." She smiled and set the water on her nightstand. You're sweet. Leaning down, she kissed my forehead, casual, almost sisterly, then clicked off the lamp and slipped into bed beside me. I lay back, staring at the dark ceiling. Her back was turned to me. Usually, we'd curl up together, or at least she'd reach out to hold my hand as we fell asleep. Tonight there was a gulf between us, a chasm of secrets and silence. I remained still, listening as her breathing evened out into the rhythm of sleep. For a long time I stayed awake, eyes open in the darkness, feeling like a stranger in my own home. That was the night I knew for certain my wife was having an affair. I got barely a wink of sleep after that. By dawn, I was already up, standing at the kitchen sink with a half-drunk cup of coffee, staring out at the dew-covered backyard without really seeing it. My mind ran in circles, alternating between sorrow and fury. When Julia came downstairs that morning, she looked beautiful and put together as always. Hair swept into a neat ponytail, makeup tastefully done for work. She flashed me that warm smile that had always melted my heart. Today, though, it barely reached my eyes. "Morning," she chimed, heading for the coffee pot. "Morning." I forced a neutral tone. I had resolved to confront her calmly, to give her one chance to come clean, even though I was certain she wouldn't. As she poured her coffee, I leaned on the counter. "You came to bed pretty late last night," I said lightly. "Everything all right?" Julia paused only a fraction of a second. I just took a few minutes to wind down after that mixer, checked some emails. Sorry if I woke you." I nodded slowly, heart pounding. She was still sticking to her story without a crack. "How was the mixer, by the way?" She turned, mug in hand, looking slightly puzzled that I was asking for details. "Oh, like I said, pretty boring. We just chatted with a few executives about industry stuff. Nothing major." I watched her carefully. "Which executives did you end up talking to?" She blinked, then gave a little shrug. Let's see. There was Mark from Orion. You remember, the one I mentioned. And a couple of his colleagues. Why?" I could hear my pulse in my ears. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Just curious. I actually swung by Veritas Wine Bar on the way home from work, thinking I might surprise you and join for a bit." I lied about the timing, but it sounded plausible. Julia's mug stopped halfway to her lips. For a split second, her facade faltered, her eyes widened just a touch, and a tiny muscle in her jaw twitched. Then she recovered, lowering the mug. You did?" "Yeah," I continued, feeling a grim momentum now. "The hostess said there was no private event. I looked for you but didn't see you anywhere." She set the coffee mug down on the counter with a shaky hand. "Dan, I left early. It must have been right before you got there." Her tone was measured, but I could hear the slight tremor beneath. I tilted my head. "You left early? You got home around 8:30. I was at Veritas by 7:45. If you'd left before then, you would have been home by 8. She opened her mouth and then closed it again. I could practically see her mind racing to plug the holes in her story. Actually, we moved to another bar," she said quickly. "Some of Mark's friends wanted a change of scenery, so we went over to that tapas place on 4th Street. I didn't think to text you, I'm sorry." "The tapas place on 4th, I repeated. "Which one? Solera? Cantina?" "Solera, yeah," she nodded, seizing on the name I provided. It was a last-minute thing. I pushed off the counter, standing up straighter as anger and hurt welled in me. "Julia, why didn't you answer when I called you?" She frowned. "When did you call?" "About 8 o'clock. I tried you. It rang a bunch. She shook her head, annoyance creeping into her voice now. I didn't hear it. Maybe it was loud or I left my phone in my purse. Dan, what's with the third degree? I exhaled slowly, trying to appear more concerned than furious. Because none of this is adding up. I went to Veritas, and you weren't there. Now you're saying you went somewhere else but didn't tell me, and you didn't answer your phone. Her eyes flashed. So you were following me? She asked, incredulous and offended. I wouldn't call it that, I said quietly. I was trying to surprise you, that's all. But I'm getting the feeling that you surprised me instead. She bristled, color rising to her cheeks. I can't believe this. You followed me to check up on me. Do you realize how controlling that is? How little you must think of me to do something like that? Her turning of the tables was so swift, so practiced, it almost threw me off balance. She wasn't apologetic or even concerned about being caught in a lie. She was attacking me for catching her. My temper flared, despite my resolve to stay calm. Julia, you lied to me, I said, my voice hardening. I know you weren't at any mixer. Why are you lying? I am not lying, she snapped, grabbing indignation as a shield. I told you we switched venues, and I didn't hear my phone. God, do you have any idea how paranoid you sound? It was gaslighting, plain and simple, but I tried not to let it derail me. Paranoid? You can understand why I might be worried. You've been acting strange for weeks. Distant, secretive. She scoffed and folded her arms. So I'm not allowed to have some personal space or a life outside of you without being accused of something awful. Maybe if you weren't so busy imagining betrayals, you'd realize how smothering you're being. My jaw clenched. Smothering. Right. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Tell me one thing then. Who were you talking to on the phone last night after you got home? Her face went a shade paler. What? When? Don't play dumb, Julia. I heard you, I said, staring right into her eyes. You were whispering to someone, saying you missed them. Julia's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She quickly composed herself, shaking her head. That was Lila. I told you she was calling me about work gossip. I said I missed having her around since she transferred. It was a blatant lie. Delivered so smoothly, it was like a slap in the face. I realized then that she would never admit the truth. She would rather dig herself deeper and turn me into the bad guy than own up to what she'd done. Despair and disgust welled up in me. The woman I loved was looking me in the eye and lying without remorse, even making me out to be the villain for questioning her. I'm not going to keep doing this, I said quietly, my hands trembling despite my attempt to appear composed. If there's something you need to tell me, Julia, now's the time. She picked up her coffee cup again, perhaps to give her hands something to do. There's nothing to tell, she replied coolly, lifting her chin. Except that I'm extremely disappointed and hurt by your behavior, Dan. This is not the kind of marriage I thought we had, where you spy on me and throw around accusations. I let out a bitter laugh. Our marriage? The one you thought we had? I repeated. You mean the one where we trust each other completely? The one where we don't keep secrets or lie about where we spend our nights? She slammed the cup down on the counter. Yes, and clearly that trust is broken now, if you think so low of me. For a moment, an impulse surged in me to pull out my phone and show her the photos I'd taken of her text messages. Shove the evidence of her betrayal right in her face. How satisfying would it be to see her caught? To watch her stammer for an excuse? But something stopped me cold. A sense of strategy cutting through the red haze of anger. If I showed my cards now, everything would be out in the open. She'd know I had her. The confrontation would be explosive. But then what? She might run straight to this other man for comfort, or start covering her tracks better, hiding money. Who knows what she'd do to protect herself? I'd lose any advantage. And I didn't just want an apology or a fight. I wanted consequences for what she'd done. Real, lasting consequences. So I swallowed the urge. I forced my voice into a calmer register. Maybe you're right, I murmured, looking down as if ashamed. Maybe I overstepped. Julia blinked, caught off guard by my sudden retreat. I'm going to be late for work, she muttered, glancing at the clock on the microwave. She grabbed her purse off the chair. We can talk about this later. I don't have time for this right now. I stepped aside. Sure, later. She hesitated, as if considering a parting shot or maybe some reassurance. In the end, she just sighed and walked out the front door without another word. The moment I heard her car pull away, I let out a shuddering breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My hands were shaking, part anger, part the come-down from the adrenaline that had been coursing through me. That confrontation confirmed one thing. Julia would never admit the truth on her own. She would keep lying until the world collapsed around her. Fine, I thought. If she wants to keep playing this game, I'll change the rules. I cleaned up the kitchen mechanically, forcing my mind to focus. I had to be careful now. If I tipped her off too much, she could start hiding assets or destroying evidence. She was good at manipulating perceptions, making me seem like the irrational one. I needed a plan, one that accounted for her deceit and leveraged it against her. That morning after she left, I realized I needed a careful strategy. Julia would never confess on her own, so I would gather proof and prepare to strike when she least expected. I consulted a divorce attorney in Durham and laid out all the evidence, her lies, the texts, the photos. He listened quietly in his wood-paneled office as I detailed everything. He assured me that North Carolina law was on my side. Adultery would ensure she got nothing in the divorce settlement. And I even had grounds to sue her lover under the state's alienation of affection laws. Together, we decided on a suitably aggressive approach. Following his advice, I hired a private investigator to obtain concrete evidence of the affair. I quietly and methodically prepared financially as well, opening a separate bank account, redirecting my paychecks, and planning to freeze our joint assets the moment I filed. Since I had bought our house before the marriage, my lawyer would file a motion to have her removed from the home due to her misconduct. I also took control of the narrative. I compiled a thorough dossier of proof, photos, messages, dates, and kept it ready. I intended to inform our close friends and family of the truth as soon as I set everything in motion, so Julia couldn't twist the story in her favor. For the next 2 weeks, I played the role of the apologetic, oblivious husband. Julia seemed relieved. She even became affectionate again, as if overcompensating with sweet gestures to reassure me. Every smile of hers felt like a knife, but I smiled back and pretended. She even tried to initiate sex one night. I went through the motions, every touch of hers filling me with revulsion, but I endured it to maintain my cover. I refused to let her suspect a thing. Inside, I was boiling. That afternoon, I even sent her a text message apologizing for overreacting and told her I trusted her. She responded almost immediately. "Thank you, I love you." The relief in her words practically leapt off the screen. Hook, line, and sinker. I kept my cool and continued to act as if everything was fine. While I acted normal, my investigator did her work. It didn't take long. Within days, I had new pictures of Julia and Eric meeting at a hotel and even entering a room together. Another evening, they were caught kissing like lovers in a secluded park. The evidence was undeniable. When the PI emailed me the first photos, a shot of Julia and Eric holding hands and kissing, I had to step outside into the cold air to calm the rage surging through me. It took all my restraint not to storm home and throw those pictures in her face that night. But I knew I had to wait for the perfect moment. Through the investigator, I also learned more about Eric. He was indeed the same man I'd met at her office party, the project manager. He was married with children. The hypocrisy was astounding. I decided his wife deserved to know what he was doing behind her back. I carefully prepared an anonymous package for her, with copies of some of the most incriminating evidence. By early December, I had everything lined up, all the legal filings, the financial safeguards, and the evidence meticulously compiled. The trap was ready to be sprung. December 15th was a Friday, and that was no accident. It was strategically chosen to serve them at work during the lunch hour, ensuring an audience and giving her the weekend to reel from the shock. That morning, I left the house early, before Julia. I had packed an overnight bag with essentials and stashed it in my trunk the night before. I wasn't sure if I'd be returning home that evening. I'd already quietly moved some of my most important personal items, documents, a few valuables, to a storage locker earlier in the week, just in case things got ugly. Around 11 a.m., I stepped out of my office and drove to a spot 2 blocks from Julia's workplace, a sleek glass mid-rise where her marketing firm occupied the 5th floor. I parked where I could see the front entrance without being immediately noticed. My nerves were humming with a mix of anxiety and grim anticipation. At 11:25, I spotted a man in a jacket carrying a slim briefcase, the process server I'd hired, heading toward the building. We had arranged that he would serve Julia at 11:30 sharp, just as employees might be stepping out for lunch. Another server was simultaneously set to serve Eric on the 7th floor, where Orion Corporation had offices. They each would receive a nicely packaged surprise, a copy of the divorce complaint I'd filed, which very explicitly named Eric as a co-respondent, along with details of their affair. Eric's envelope also included notice of my intent to sue him in civil court. At 11:32, I saw them. Eric emerged first through the building's front doors, striding with the confidence of a man who thought he had the world in his pocket. Right behind him was Julia. They weren't touching, but they walked out together, a little apart from others, chatting with an ease that made my blood boil. She was looking up at him and smiling, the same warm, glowing smile that used to be reserved for me. They paused at the top of the front steps. As a few other employees shuffled past them on their way out, the process server approached. He spoke to Julia first, confirming her identity, then handed her the thick envelope. I saw her face scrunch in confusion. Eric turned toward them, clearly asking what was going on. Then the server handed an envelope to him as well. Even from my distance, I could see Julia's expression shift from puzzlement to dawning panic as she looked at the first page of the documents. She tore into the envelope, eyes scanning, her head jerked up, and she glanced around wildly, likely searching for me. Eric was reading his own papers, brow furrowing and then darkening with anger. The server, having done his job, calmly turned and walked away, disappearing down the sidewalk. Eric said something sharply to Julia. I could see the angry set of his jaw and took a step toward her. She reached out as if to calm him, but he pulled his arm away, his face contorting with fury. People coming in and out of the lobby began to notice the commotion. A few paused, looking over curiously. It was my cue. I pocketed my phone, which by now was lighting up with notifications, no doubt Julia already trying to call, and stepped out of my car. My legs felt oddly steady as I crossed the street and approached them. Julia saw me first. She was halfway down the steps, and she froze, one hand clutched around the stack of papers. "Dan," she said, voice an odd mix of relief and dread. Eric turned to face me as I came to a stop a few feet away on the sidewalk. His eyes were blazing. "You bastard!" he started, stepping forward as if to square up to me. I held up a hand calmly. "I wouldn't, Eric," I said, meeting his glare with one of my own. He was a few inches taller than me and bulkier, but I had the advantage of surprise and righteousness, and he knew it. He stopped short, nostrils flaring. Julia looked between us, panic written all over her face. "Dan, please, can we not do this here?" she pleaded softly. Let's go somewhere and talk. Please." I glanced at her. There were tears in her eyes already, and her lower lip trembled. She looked small and frightened in a way I'd never seen. It almost pricked at my heart. Almost. But I steeled myself, remembering every lie, every betrayal. "Why not here, Julia?" I replied coldly, feeling exposed. She swallowed and glanced around. A few of her co-workers were gathered near the doorway, whispering and watching. This public spectacle was clearly her nightmare. And in another life I might have cared. Not today. Eric waved the papers at me, his hand shaking with rage. "Do you think this stunt is going to ruin me, huh? You think you've won?" His voice was low and harsh, probably trying not to attract more attention, but failing. "You'll regret this." I gave him a thin, icy smile. "I don't think so. That document in your hand says it all. You made a very poor choice, and now you're facing the consequences." "You son of a—" He lunged a half step toward me, voice rising. "Careful," I cut in softly, eyes on his. "'Cause a scene, Eric. Please. There are plenty of witnesses." I tilted my head toward the onlookers by the door. Through the glass, I even noticed a security guard hovering uncertainly in the lobby. Eric followed my gaze and visibly restrained himself. Julia moved closer to me, reaching out as if to touch my arm. "Dan, I'm sorry," she whispered, tears streaming now. I never wanted—" I stepped back, out of her reach. "Don't," I snapped, my voice sharp enough that she flinched. "You think sorry means anything right now?" Her face crumpled, and she began to sob softly. "Please, can we just talk about this? Privately," she begged. It was amazing, really. Now she wanted privacy, after everything had been dragged into the light. "No, Julia," I said, voice like ice. "We're well past talking. You'll find everything clearly laid out in those papers you just received. That's my talk." She looked down at the divorce complaint in her hands, as if it might burn her. "Dan," she choked out, "we can figure something out. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But we can fix this." "Fix this?" I echoed, incredulous. "You've been sleeping with him for God knows how long, lying to me every day. There's no fixing that." I took a slow breath, steadying myself. My hands were shaking with adrenaline. "This is me fixing it. Permanently." Julia's shoulders shook. "I never meant to hurt you," she cried. "I was going to end it. I swear, I was going to—" "Stop," I interrupted harshly. "Just stop. You meant every choice you made, and now you get to live with them." I turned to Eric, who was fuming silently at my side. "Both of you do," he sneered. "You think taking her money and dragging me into court will make you happy? You're pathetic." I felt a flash of anger, but managed a cool chuckle. "Happy? No. But I will feel satisfied knowing neither of you will get to just walk away from this." I stepped closer to him, lowering my voice. By the way, Eric, how's Vanessa? And the kids? His bravado faltered. A look of pure panic crossed his face at the mention of his wife. What did you— If you haven't told your wife about all this, don't worry, I said. I made sure she found out. In fact, she probably got a special delivery of her own this morning. I watched him blanch. In truth, I knew Vanessa had the evidence by now. My courier confirmed the envelope was delivered to her law office just before noon. You son of a bitch, he hissed, eyes wide. He suddenly looked less like an angry alpha and more like a man whose life was crumbling beneath him. I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. I turned my attention back to Julia, who stood shivering, arms wrapped around herself. I'll have someone come by to serve the formal separation orders too, I told her. That house, it's mine. You'll be vacating it. And our joint accounts? Frozen. She stared at me, her eyes red and puffy. You already talked to a lawyer, she said numbly. Yes, I did. While you were busy cheating. I noticed she was swaying on her feet. For a moment I worried she'd faint right there on the sidewalk. She didn't, but her expression was distant, hollowed out by shock. Eric was already stumbling away down the sidewalk, cursing under his breath and pulling out his phone, likely to call his wife or maybe a lawyer of his own. He didn't so much as glance back at Julia. She watched him go, a fresh sob breaking from her throat. The man she'd wrecked our marriage for was leaving her to face this alone. I saw something die in her eyes at that realization. A part of me wanted to feel pity, but I couldn't summon it. I remembered the countless nights I'd looked at her and felt love, not knowing she was betraying me. I remembered her laugh with him outside the office just minutes ago, and pity evaporated. Dan, she whispered, reaching out to me once more. Please, I know I don't deserve it. But can we please just talk? I'm so sorry. I took a long, slow look at her. This beautiful, charismatic woman that I had once adored now looked small, broken, and desperate. In some distant part of my mind, I realized my heart wasn't racing anymore, and the tremble in my hands had steadied. I felt calm. There's nothing left to talk about, I said quietly. I meant it. Her face crumpled completely. Is this really what you want? To destroy me, she whimpered. I glanced at the papers in her hand, her social and professional ruin spelled out in black and white. Then I met her eyes. No, Julia. You did this. To yourself. My voice softened just a hair, more solemn than angry. All I'm doing is making sure you face the consequences. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen her cry like that, but it stirred nothing in me now. I turned away, feeling an overwhelming urge to leave. Take care of yourself, I muttered simply. I walked back to my car, leaving her standing there on the sidewalk, clutching those divorce papers like a lifeline that had turned into her noose. From the corner of my eye, I saw the cluster of bystanders awkwardly pretend to resume their own business as I passed. I'm sure by day's end, every employee in her office would know what happened, that the charming Julia's husband showed up and served her divorce papers for cheating. As humiliations go, it was one for the books. I drove a few blocks away and then pulled over, my hands suddenly trembling again now that I was alone. I took a deep breath. It was done. The broad strokes of my revenge had landed. That afternoon, I met briefly with my attorney, Craig, at the courthouse to officially file the papers that had been served. It was mostly a formality after the drama, but it felt like tying off the bow on a job well done. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I checked into a hotel downtown, ironically not far from that one the PI had caught them at. Using my new credit card, in my name only, I got a room on a high floor. I remember standing by the floor-to-ceiling window after dark, looking out over the city lights. I should have felt something like triumph, but in that quiet moment I only felt exhausted emptiness. I was vindicated, yes, but the cost of that vindication was the loss of the life I thought I had. Julia called me twice that evening and left a single voicemail full of broken sobs and pleas. I listened just long enough to confirm there was nothing of substance, no sudden truth or insight. Then I deleted it. I blocked her number. From now on, any communication she wanted to have would go through my lawyer. Over the next days, the aftermath unfolded swiftly. Julia was ordered to leave our house within a week by court order. She packed her things and moved in with a college friend, too ashamed to face her parents. Her father later told me he was heartbroken and disappointed in her. Her parents even apologized to me for her behavior, which I accepted quietly. Our families and friends already knew the truth from me, and word spread quickly through our social circle, so she found little sympathy. She tried reaching out to me once or twice, leaving a tearful voicemail pleading for a chance to explain, but I had nothing to say. I deleted her messages and kept her blocked. At her office, word of the affair spread like wildfire. The warm, respected persona she'd built there was shattered. She took a sudden leave of absence and, I learned, resigned within weeks, unable to endure the whispers and stares. Not long after, she left town entirely to start fresh in another city, carrying the weight of her ruined reputation with her. Eric's life unraveled even faster. His wife filed for divorce the very next day and reportedly threw him out of their home. Vanessa was, by all accounts, furious and ruthless. He resigned from his job soon after, whether due to company pressure over the scandal or simply having no stomach to stay, I don't know. He ended up in a small apartment across town, and his time with his children became limited to short, supervised visits while the custody battle raged. I pressed forward with my civil lawsuit against him for alienation of affection. Whether or not I ever won a single dollar, I took grim satisfaction in knowing I'd be dragging him through a legal hell of his own making for months, if not years, to come. Meanwhile, in early spring, our divorce was finalized. Julia, faced with the irrefutable evidence and a fault-based case, didn't contest much. She waived any claim to my house or any support as part of our settlement. I kept the house and everything that mattered. She didn't fight me on it, not after the evidence I had. Finally, in early spring, the judge signed off, and just like that, 8 years of marriage ended with a few pen strokes. I walked out of the courthouse on a cool April morning, feeling like I could breathe fully for the first time in a long while. As for me, I felt a strange sense of peace once the dust settled. There were nights when I sat in the silence of my half-empty home, grieving the life I thought I had, the wife I thought I knew. Sometimes anger would flare or loneliness would creep in, but it was far better to live with an ugly truth than a comfortable lie. I focused on rebuilding. I repainted the walls, bought new furniture, and made the house mine again, purging the ghosts of our shared past. Friends commented that I seemed lighter, more alive than I'd been in years. They were right. I had been living under a shadow of doubt and deceit, and now that shadow was gone. Her parents, perhaps out of guilt or sorrow, continued to reach out to me for a while, even after the divorce. I assured them, truthfully, that I'd be okay, and I bore them no ill will. It wasn't their fault. In time, those conversations grew infrequent as I moved on, and they focused on supporting their daughter, who would need all the help she could get to piece her life back together. I had some help piecing myself back together, too. My closest friends stuck by me. We went out for beers, to ball games, normal things that reminded me I wasn't defined by this betrayal. I even went to a few therapy sessions, just to sort through the whirlwind of emotions in a constructive way. Each day, I felt a bit more like me again. One warm evening in June, a few buddies came over for a barbecue on my back deck, the same deck where Julia and I had hosted parties together in sunnier times. I realized as we laughed and talked that I genuinely felt happy in that moment. Not just okay, but happy. It struck me how far I'd come. Kevin, my best friend, clapped me on the shoulder as we tended the grill. "Man, I've never seen you so relaxed. It's like you came back to life." He was right. I had come back to life. The version of me that had been tied in knots, second-guessing himself, putting on a fake smile to a lying spouse. That man was gone. In his place was someone who knew exactly what reality was and could face it head-on. After everyone left that night, I lingered on the deck alone, sipping one last beer as the crickets chirped. Through the open patio door, I could see my living room, freshly painted and refurnished, glowing softly in the lamplight. It looked warm, peaceful, honest. I thought of Julia and Eric, two people who had deceived and used others for their own gratification, and I felt nothing for them. No anger, no pity. They had destroyed the world we had, and in doing so, they'd destroyed their own worlds too. That was justice enough for me. I leaned on the deck railing and raised my bottle in a silent toast to the night sky. I had not only survived their betrayal, I had triumphed. I didn't yet know what the future held for me, but I knew one thing. I was no one's fool, and I would never let anyone take advantage of me like that again. Whatever came next, I would face it with my head held high and my heart unburdened. In that quiet moment, I realized I'd rather stand alone with my integrity than ever live under lies again. And that, more than any cold plan or revenge executed, was the real victory I'd earned.